As you can imagine, the first thing you need to do when you develop any project is just make sure you have the correct tools in place that you want to use. Basically, anything that's going to be required to build your project, you need to make sure you have that tool in your toolbox. Now, it should be kind of obvious that I'm going to use a code editor like Cursor as part of my IDE and developer environment. I'm also going to use the documentation from Monad, and I'm going to use, of course, a terminal. But what else are we going to do on top of that? Well, like I said in the previous video, Monad is fully 100% EVM compatible, and as such, we're going to build a couple different ways. We're going to tackle things like the smart contract first. And what Monad actually really recommends using is something called Foundry. Foundry is kind of like a framework that just scaffolds the bones of your smart contract for you. You can then leverage something like an LLM or Cursor to fill in the gaps for you, but of course, this is blockchain, and blockchain is really a financial market, so almost anything that you do on-chain is going to incur some form of a cost, and you don't just want to blindly trust LLMs with your actual production code. You want to make sure that you have someone who is security-minded review the code and make sure there's not some sort of security flaw in it. That being said, this is a hello world environment, and we're just focusing on the testnet, so this isn't real world money. Just when you go to mainnet, make sure you do that. So largely, we're going to start off with Foundry. Then, when it comes to the front-end dApp, decentralized application, we're going to use something called the Reown AppKit to scaffold our front-end to our smart contract. We really like Reown. Monad recommends it in their documentation because it handles the wallet connector and the chain switching really, really well. I've tried manually creating front-end applications that use, things like Phantom or MetaMask, and it really, really struggles when it comes to switching to the Monad chain for whatever reason. However, when I use Reown, it works perfectly. So these are the two big ways that we're going to tackle this. And of course, we're starting with the smart contract itself. So when I flip over to the documentation here for a second, this is docs.monad.xyz. And I want to show you right now, they have this Ask Monad AI at the top that gives you a ChatGPT or LLM type experience. I do recommend, wherever possible, specifying that this is for Monad. Whatever question you ask, specify that it's for Monad. Because if you ask it, how do I just develop a smart contract without saying for Monad, it'll dive into something. Like I've actually seen it dive into how to build for the Move VM on the SWE network before using this. So do make sure that you specify Monad where possible. It does keep your chat history, which is really nice. And that's what we're going to do. So what we're going to do is actually start by installing Foundry and our other things that we require. Let me flip on over to my terminal here, and I'm going to immediately give it a brew install Node, and make sure that Node.js is installed. I'll press enter here, and I'll hit pause while it goes through the installation. That installation finishes up pretty quickly, and just for good measure, I'm going to do one more thing. I'm also going to make sure that this is using Node version 20 or greater. This is really for our front end because I'm going to build the front end using Next.js, and that requires Node version 20. Now, I happen to have NVM installed in this environment. If you need to go get NVM, feel free to do it. I'll give it an NVM use 20, and now I'm for sure using Node version 20, which is great. The next thing I'm going to do is move into my base working directory, which is a code folder. When I use Foundry, it will create a subfolder in here for the project itself. So to install Foundry, we're going to start by downloading the installer with a curl L for the link, https://foundry.paradigm.xyz, and then pipe that to bash so that it goes through the first pieces right there. Now it says, we have detected our preferred shell is Z shell. We need to update our environment variable with this source command, or we could relaunch terminal to do that. I'm just going to use the source command, which is not win public mainnet. We will grab source Command C, let's try and paste that in right there and press enter. Now that source has been done, it says simply run Foundry up to install Foundry. So I'll type in Foundry up to install Foundry, and this goes through the installation, which happens pretty quickly. I'll pause it and come back to it when it's done. Oh, it is done. So what comes next? We will use Foundry to scaffold our basic project. Now you would think that would mean the CLI command starts with Foundry, but it's actually Forge. Foundry installed a command, more or less, called Forge, and we will say init to start up our project, and I'll call this Monad Light Switch to give our project a name, but I'll spell light switch correctly, and I'll press enter here, and that creates the project. If I move into Monad Light Switch like so, I can now use cursor dot to launch in this folder. I'll press enter, and cursor launches in this folder. Now, what do we need to do next? Immediately in the foundry.toml file, we need to set the exact RPC endpoint for Monad. So I'll open braces right there, or brackets, excuse me. I'll say RPC underscore endpoints, and then under that, I will set the value for Monad Testnet, and then set it to the public RPC endpoint. https:// testnet -rpc.monad.xyz, and save that file. This scaffolds the smart contract portion of our website. There's not much else we need to do at this point. Because we installed Node, we really have everything we need to do the front end as well. So with all our dependencies in place, we can move on to actually building the smart contract in the next video.